Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Stepping Up with me, Kindar, the Tiger Bites, and I, the Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing Chapter 38. The Dark Night, Kodar explained, was the night when Clario and Taurus vanished from the sky together for a few minutes away from their children. Tibs knew those nights, but hadn't known they had a name. They were the nights when running the roost was dangerous because the stars alone, the children of the story, didn't provide enough light for them to see by. Karina hadn't known of it since nights didn't carry any significance to her. Vance had heard of it but didn't keep track, and Jekyll hadn't been around to ask. Joseph hadn't known, nor had any of his siblings. He could ask Baron, who should have known as someone who stole, but the merchant had never been one dependent on the night. He'd applied for the merchants once on the chance they were familiar with it, but he was sent away when it became clear that he wasn't buying. There was a dark mood hanging over Richard's Row since the fire. That left Tibbs with one recourse. Alistair would know, and hopefully not wonder why Tibbs was asked about that particular night. The question was if he was in Craggle already or away and would only arrive in time for his training. The only way to know was to go to the guild. Any idea what the plan is? The cleric asked their companion as they walked. Tibbs turned to follow them on hearing the next word. They're running out of people to send in the dungeon. Tibbs had been moving to the first floor of the guild building for a few minutes, checking the common and open practice room in case his teacher was there and had inexplicably gotten lost twice already. Magic had to be involved. Magic had been involved. It had to be. He'd been trying to make his way back to the entrance when he came across a pair of clerks. The man snorted. They're just going to bring. They're just going to bring in more criminals. Kingdoms are always happy to send us those to dispose of them. But they have to catch them first, that's what she said. Have you looked at the numbers? We've gone to over 10,000 since the dungeon was found. The usual providers only have the kind of criminals that were caught on their first crime loft. Those aren't going to do us any good the way the dungeon is eating them. It's going to calm down, I said. It's probably still rebuilding its strength. It nearly died. It won't if we can't send anyone there for it to feed on. She paused, and they walked in silence for long enough. Tibbs was about to go back to his search. You think there's something wrong with it? What do you mean? You've heard about it, she insisted, and her companion shook his head. We lost nearly 90% of the original conscript. They were They were row with a handful of lambda. Samson says the dungeon's going feral. That isn't a thing, let's go. No better than that. I heard stories of it. Since when do you believe a bard? Or are you saying someone who knows what they're talking about is who you heard it from? She didn't reply. I thought so. You think they'll abandon it if things don't change? Of course not. That's just an invitation from one of the kings in the area to make a play for it. We know the mess that's going to turn into. I don't know what the guild does if the dungeon ends up not being a good investment. I mean, we're here to get adventurers out of the deal, not just feed it. I am so glad I'm never going to be of a rank where I have to deal with those decisions. He chuckled. No ambition? I am quite happy doing inventory and filling out reports. Stop. She stopped at the door. Speaking of which, I have to get back to it. His walk past them. Have fun with that. Lucky me has to travel and talk to magistrate and explain the criminals we need have to be of age, at least. I don't want a repeat of the toddler incident. He grumbled. Was Stoke sick? It sounded fine during the run, other than him and Danny arguing a lot. Would Tibbs be able to tell if Stowe was sick? He couldn't see the essence the way that he did of people, and Stowe wasn't a person the way Tibbs was. What would the sickness be like for him? Would Stowe know? Was that what had Ganny worried? Are you lost? A woman asked, and Tibbs froze. He'd been distracted by what he found out. He'd been and hadn't been paying attention to where he was walking. He looked around. The room was large, with desks and people seated behind them. They had papers and ink pots. The woman and the one closest to him had wood for an element, or green eyes, and the density of her essence made her slightly more powerful than Jackal. "Hey, that's Lightfinger," the man on the desk next to her said. His eyes were of a darker gray than metal, and his essence was denser than hers. He wore light clothing, one thing that indicated what class he had. Tibbs had noted that most of the workers in the guild dressed like artisans more than adventurers. "Are you here for a meeting?" Another asked, looking up from a stack. His eyes were crystal, and based on how dense his essence was, he had to be Lambda. "Looking for Alistair, my teacher." That's good of an excuse, and it wasn't an excuse. He was looking for him. "Anyone know who that is?" the boy called. Despite his age and lower rank, he seemed to have some authority. "If he's a teacher," someone replied, "he isn't hanging out with the likes of us." That made them chuckle. He studied the people in the room. Most of their eyes were green. Those who had other elements seemed to be weaker in them. Did wood help with writing? Tibbs hoped not. If it did, Kirner would demand he get the element to help him practice his letters. Could he get wood? Once he had the others, the ones Water had told him to get. Would she give him more? Would she give him more? How many were there? He never asked. He wasn't sure how he could ask now. "Mr. Lightfinger?" she said, still smiling. Tibbs considered telling her, all of them, that Lightfinger wasn't his name. "I have to ask you to leave. You really shouldn't be here." He nodded. What was the point? They wouldn't listen. No one did. He wanted to find out where Bardic was so he could kick him in the shin for saddling him with that name. He made his way back, keeping his mind on where he was going so he wouldn't get lost a fourth time. He made it to the training rooms, and Alistair was on the other end of the corridor in an argument with Harry. Tibbs stayed where he was. He didn't want to risk Harry asking what Tibbs wanted, since he could think of an answer that wouldn't contain at least a slight lie. The guard leader noticed him and pointed before turning and storming away. Alistair wasn't happy at the interruption, but he put a smile on once he saw Tibbs. "This is unexpected," his teacher said once Tibbs joined him. His voice was trained. "I didn't expect you to show up for training quite this early." "What was that about?" Alistair ran a hand over his face and nose. Harry being Harry. "Crime grows as a town, crime grows as a town does the same, and he isn't happy about it. He is under the mistaken impression that keeping the non-guild affiliated thieves that are settling here under control is my responsibility." He asked for my help with one of them. He kept from shuddering at the memory of how the thief had died. What kind of person used poison like that? He mentioned that. You shouldn't have accepted. He's in charge of stopping them, not you. He shrugged. He was trying to cause trouble for the nobles. Everyone would have paid for that. He smiled. And Harry couldn't handle it. Without me. Remember how you said you didn't like how the guild treated you special? His teacher said soberly, and Tibbs' smile fell. You aren't part of the guard, Tibbs. You aren't responsible for the town. You need to focus on your training, getting stronger on surviving the dungeon. That been worrying Alistair's voice? I am, but I can't train all the time. It gets boring. You can't simply train when it's exciting. That will get you killed. I do my lessons, Tibbs stated. I try to push my essence through the walls of my reserve. Right. But when nothing happens, it's hard to stay with it. Until Alistair thought there was something wrong with how long it took, along with his young age, work as an excuse. I know. I had to deal with that too, once. Tibs raised an eyebrow. Even without any particular difficulties, learning is still hard work. Learning is still hard work. You'll get there, but not if you get yourself killed first. Stop helping Harry. We're rogues. We put ourselves first. Tibs smiled. I did that my entire life, and all it did was get me in a cell to have my hand cut off. I have a team. I have a town. I'm not going to let the nobles take that from me, or some thief who wants to cause trouble. Exasperation in Alistair's eyes took time to get under control. What brought you here? Looking to put in more training? Maybe he could later. Do you know when the Dark Night is? Why do you want to know that? Teacher asked, surprised. Just curious. I heard people talk about it and I want to pay attention the next time. Alistair let out a breath and looked up at fingers tapping his thigh. Let's see. We're the 20th of Sardin. In this part of the world, Clario will wink in 3 days, but Taurus isn't due to ensconce himself then. It isn't until the 8th of Marmel for him, and then, no, Clario too that day. The 8th of Marmel is when it'll happen. You'll have to ask someone more familiar with the area for an exact time. He grinned. I travel too much to bother with local times. Sardin and Marmel were names of the months, and each was 4 and 5 days long. Is Marmel next month? Still had trouble remember which names went with which month. Alistair nodded. So, he counted his fingers. He had 2 and 5 days until Marmel started. Then it was 8 days, so he needed more fingers for those large numbers. You are working at this quite hard for something that's merely curiosity. Marina wants me to practice my numbers too, he answered, not having to act being annoyed. She wants me to add and remove too. What have you come up with? 3 in 3 days. Tibs looked at Alistair hopefully. 33, that's right. 9 days in a week. Can you borrow Alistair's hand? First 3 were the first 3 were in tens, so he took away 1 for each and moved it to the other. 3 weeks and 6 days. That was a long time during which he would have to practice going hungry. When is the one after that? A few more weeks meant he wouldn't have to suffer right now. Alistair studied him before answering. I'm not an astrologer. I can tell you Claria winks every 30th day and Taurus ensconces himself every 52nd one. Smiled. Why don't you make this an excuse, an exercise, and find the answer for yourself? Didn't look at his hands. How in the abyss was he supposed to do that? 3 and 3. 3 weeks and 6 days. That was how long he had to practice going hungry, or it wouldn't happen. Tibs looked up as he approached the house. Maria was nearly all gone. One day and she'd wink, as Alistair called it. The next one, and he'd try for his audience. If he didn't succeed, it wouldn't happen. Marino had told him when the next dark night would be. From the numbers he gave her, and it was so many days away, Tibs couldn't understand the number. He looked around for movement before climbing down from the roof. Only cats followed them with him. The other rogues and thieves might consider this too dark to risk their roofs, or the area wasn't wealthy enough for them to bother with either. Tibs paused between floors. Why not a pouch of silver become not wealthy enough? Not so long ago, Tibs would have taken a risk that could get him killed for the chance to see the whole copper. Why did he stop counting them? He dropped the rest of the way and listened for indication anyone had heard him. Workers lived in this part of the town, and the guards only patrolled it every other hour. He stepped to his target. The house had been abandoned, when the town was deserted, the wakes of the attack on Stowe, and no one had moved back in. Tibs had thought it was because there were so many other houses, but then he heard the stories of noises in and around it. Haunted, people said. A creature had escaped a dungeon, others said. Karina said the creature could escape, but it was one of the reasons the guards were at the door. Any who made it out would be killed. As for haunting, she scoffed at the idea. When people died, they just died. If it was in the dungeon, their essence fed him. If it was outside, the essence just went where the essence went. When Tibs had asked questions of the people telling the stories, he got more details. Scratching was what they heard, but louder than rats. One had seen a beast on all four, large, with red eyes and pointed teeth, that growled and laughter had sounded. The sound had come more often recently, they had admitted. Tibbs hadn't been able to get a day, but now he had an idea of what this was. Ooh. The window pushed in with the barest creak, but it was enough for something inside to move. Tibbs dropped onto the dark room and a growl came. Then a second, a third. Claws sounded on the wooden floor, and as they approached, Tibbs took the jerky out of his pocket and broke a piece off. The growling stopped. He smiled and crouched, offering it to the darkness. One of them approached, sniffed its hand, then snatched a piece and ran off. Tibbs hadn't seen enough to be sure, but he thought that had been Thumper. He broke another piece, and more came at him. He was under the pile of dogs, fighting to get jerky. Out of a pocket before they ripped it open, pushing them away from his face so they'd stop licking him. Dog slobber was gross. No! Someone snarled and the dog scattered. What the fuck are you doing here? He got to his feet as sparks flew and a candle caught. The woman who became visible in the pale light looked nothing like the one Tibs had met before. Her black hair was wild, her skin dirty. The way she looked at him, teeth bare, reminded Tibs of an angry dog. I was worried about you, she snorted. You don't know me. I hardly know anyone in the town anymore. I still worry about it. He stepped forward cautiously. I'm sorry. What for? She snarled. One of your dog was killed. One? You think one is what it took for me to come here? I'm sorry. I only knew of one. That one wasn't for me. It was for the rest of them. It was close enough to see she wasn't wearing anything, and the dogs were massed around her. There were a lot more dogs than Tibs knew she had. Sebastian killed them, he said. Had them killed. He doesn't do the work unless he really cares about those involved. I never wanted his attention. There was so much anger, Tibs couldn't tell if it was because he'd ordered the death of her dogs or because he hadn't done it himself. Dogs growled as he took another step. Oh, now you don't like him? She asked sarcastically. I'm out of jerky. He crouched. She looked disappointed. Serba, what? She asked, and the threat was cleared. Are you going to stay here, living like this? Isn't Harry going to worry about you? She snorted. My uncle doesn't care about me any more than my father does. I'm one of his guards, not family. Tibs couldn't argue. In the time since she'd disappeared, Harry hadn't done anything to look for her as far as he knew. He wanted to tell her Jackal was worried, but that would be a lie. Jackal was terrified of her and her dogs. Any day she wasn't around was a good day for him. I came looking, finally said. Sorry it took me so long, but you hid well. Her simple, wow. Her smile was small, but the pride bright, if quickly extinguished. What do you want? For you to come back. If I go out there and don't do what my father orders me to, more of my dogs are going to die. What does he want me to do? She shook her head. Serva, I want to help you. She laughed. You are deluded if you think there is something you can help with. It's all lost, Tibs. This town was lost the instant my father set foot on this platform. No, this is my town. I'm going to keep it safe. My father controls an entire city. Even the king lets him do what he wants. My father knows everyone who can threaten him, and he's already dealt with them. He hasn't dealt with me. Her laughter died quickly. You're serious? You think you can stand up to him? He's going to have you killed, Tibs. I've survived the dungeon. I'm not afraid of what Sebastian can do. You should be, she whispered. My father isn't the dungeon. He cheats, I know, but I'm a rogue. I cheat too. He ran a finger over his braces. And he had access to so much more than anyone here, which is a question of getting serious about his training. This concludes chapter 38 of Stepping Up. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next one's going to be, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read more of the story, you can do that for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of what is posted, you can do that on my Patreon by supporting me. And if you want to listen to me do these live, it's every Tuesday on Twitch, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Rest of the week, I write. And the links are in the note. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.